Hi, I'm Teresa Bruno. Thank you so much for joining us today on the Soul Talks podcast. I'm here with one of my favorite people in the world, Natalia and I. We've covered a couple or many really tough topics the last few weeks, and you know what? We've got to cover another one that has to be brought forward in our stories of survival, and that's the topic of shame and fear. So we're going to dive in. Hey. The first time you and I talked about how much we needed to talk about shame and sharing our stories, I clammed up. I don't know if you remember. I couldn't even talk to you about it because I didn't want to talk about my shame.
You were asking me questions, but you were like going all around all of the ones about you. But I think that is so valid because shame is such a difficult thing to talk about.
So hard.
It's like, it's cringy.
It is.
It's so destructive.
And I think that's why we're bringing it forward. And you have to, of course, always say, Bremen Brown, brilliant woman, amazing thinker in our world today and thought motivator, 2 decades of study on one topic. And she's done it and brought it forward in our culture so that we talk about shame now. 20 years ago, I'm not sure we thought shame was a household word. But you're right. I don't want to talk about mine. And yet, what you said is the very reason we're doing it because, and I didn't do shame well in my first 2 years of my journey out of my tragedies, in my survival journey. I did all the things wrong. But as Bremen Brown teaches, and I subscribe to it because I did everything wrong, the things that keep you in shame, and this is why it's so destructive, are silence, secrecy, and judgment. And I know you've shared with me some of the ways that you were secretive and folded in on yourself. Would you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. I think shame was the hardest part for me. When I went through my divorce, when I found out about the cheating, I could not talk about it. And I mean, I could not say the word.
I couldn't say the word divorce.
I could not say the word divorce. It took me probably 2 years to be able to say it. If I had a conversation, it would I just couldn't say it. If I said the word divorce, it would I could feel my skin crawling and it was that bad. And if I had to talk about the cheating for a long time, I just said, oh, we just grew apart. It was so hard for me to talk about it because I had so much shame about it. And in my mind, I think I was judging myself so much for what happened because in my mind, it was my self-worth that was being compromised. It was I used to tell my friend, I feel like I'm damaged goods. Nobody's gonna want it. If this person did this, why would anybody else want? Why, because people can be like, oh, you're so pretty, you're so nice, you're gonna find somebody else. But it doesn't fix what happened, and I wasn't looking for somebody else. So the shame of having to be in this position and having to talk about, and I was hiding because when it happened, I was so ashamed because there was a bunch of people, they were there when it happened. And a lot of people saw it and they knew it. And I just didn't know the context of it. And I'm like, how did all these people that I thought that were part of my circle were there and they were okay with it, maybe encouraging. And I wasn't there, so I can't really say what happened because I don't really know how it was. But I was just playing all these scenarios, and the self-conversation, the self-talk was so destructive. How did you not see it when you were there? He was away and we were talking through FaceTime. How did you not pick up on it? Because everything was normal. So I felt so ashamed that everybody knew except for me. I was judging myself so much for the fact that happened to me. And I think there was part of it. There were times where I wasn't happy, but I stayed and I wanted to fix it. And I was vocal about it if I wasn't happy. So why didn't you give me the grace to just let me go. And I had so much shame for staying and guilt and all of these things, for staying with this person and making this person being like up here to everybody else. And now you're going to do this to me. The betrayal was so destructive to me. I couldn't talk to people. That's how bad it was. I could not
get it.
talk.
I completely
If
get
a
it.
man approached me, I
Oh.
would like get like completely frozen.
Interesting.
Because I didn't trust people. I wasn't able to talk to people. I could go days and weeks without talking to anybody. But I do think I needed to be a little bit like quiet. I needed to understand what I was going through before I could just go out there and talk to people. Like, I think if I had just jumped into talking to people and jumping to relationships, I don't think it would have been good for me. I think I needed to learn to be by myself.
That's a powerful thing to say. I needed to learn to be by myself. And we've talked a little bit about that in the past. So I'm curious, how long do you feel like you stayed in that place where shame was destructive?
Shame, probably, like, I would say probably like 2-3 years, like in a destructive ways for a while. Shame is like that, like the friend that you don't really like it, but like you kind of have to be like, it comes back every once in a while and you got to say hi, acknowledge, and like don't talk to it for another year. That's how shame feels like to me. It's like every once in a while you come visit me, I'm like, okay, I've seen you before, go away now. Like I have, like, it comes back.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, to say, okay, we're working on the shame that we had coming out of these huge life events that were so difficult for both of us. But the truth is, you know, shame, you always have some kind of shame in your life. It, as you said, it keeps coming back. We have shame by 1,000 cuts, you know, over our lifetime. My sister has this great story that she shared with me, and it stuck really hard in the midst of all this. She was trying to help me kind of get my arms around my shame, and she knew that I loved every year to plant an herb garden in the back. And she said, you know how you've learned to plant your mint in a big pot? And I said, yeah, whatever. I plant my mint in a pot. She said, you know, when you plant mint in the ground, you know, you come back the next day and your whole garden's covered in it. And you come back a week later and it's traveled all the way over to your neighbor's yard. And you can try your best to clean up all the mint and to get every leaf and to get every vine and to get it completely cleaned up. You come back a few days later and there's something growing again. That's how shame is. It spreads like that. You clean it up. We both have worked hard to clean up the shame from these events. But all of your life, shame's coming at you, you know, revisiting. But you learn to have some tools to work your way out of it. So you had those 2 or 3 years being very silent, feeling the betrayal. How did you begin to work out of it?
Well, I think it was like the shame. At first, shame, kind of like the way you said it. I like how you said this. It really spread to other things, because then I was shamed because I wasn't working when I got a divorce. So now I have to restart, and like I don't really have a career, and I'm trying to figure out, and I'm 34, and the time like is going by, and I'm like, for me, I really had to I had to be alone. That was the only answer I had, because I tried to move to another city. I could not fathom the idea of staying where I was, the city where I was, because I couldn't face the people.
So the aloneness became positive.
I think I made it positive. I think because I was willing to dig really deep and like figure out my demons. And I'm like, you and I are going to have to figure out how to coexist. You either go away or we're going to have to coexist. So because I couldn't stay in the same city, I couldn't face anybody. I didn't want to be one of those people that it starts like talking poorly. Even though we were divorced, I didn't want to speak poorly about him. And so I laughed, and that was my first chance of like trying to be alone. And I was trying to move on, but the shame wouldn't go away. And it was so destructive because I couldn't make decisions. It affected me to like just have clear mind to make decisions, because I judge myself so much. Like the talk of like him saying to me like, you're never going to make it, that stayed in my mind for a long time. And now like I had to leave. It was it was the only solution I had that was possible, and just be alone. And I'm like, I'm going to try to figure this out and try to face everything and figure out how I feel about things. Can I get rid of these feelings? And I didn't know if I was going to be able to.
A couple of things you said in there that I wanted to go back to. I repeat the Bremen Brown thing saying, we stay in shame because we're in silence. We don't share our pain. We stay in shame because we're secretive about it. I certainly did all those things. But what I love about your story is the power of getting alone. And you talk about having to work it out, having to ask yourself the questions. I've told you this before, and I need to memorize what this man said, but there was this poet who lived in the early 20th century. I think he was Austrian by birth, and his name's Rainer Marie Rilke. And he wrote this wonderful letter to another young poet who was going through a really tough time. And what he said is this concept I think is so beautiful for how we live all of our lives, surviving anything, coming through something like shame. He said, don't be so concerned about the answers. Learn to live the questions. And then one day, if you just keep living with the questions without even realizing it, the answers will be there for you. And I feel like in a way that's what you're saying happened for you.
Yeah. I knew if I stayed, I had these like mix of moments of like, I felt like I was conscious of what was going on and like I wasn't. But I knew in the moments where I had some type of sanity, I was like, I have to keep moving and I got to figure this out. Because I was reading a lot at the time and I was trying to figure out answers and things like that. And I knew I couldn't put my happiness on somebody else's hands again. Or even if it was a friend, I couldn't become dependent of someone else to take me out of there. I could count on people to help me. And I had my friend Natalia, who I used to talk, she was the only person I could really open up to some of these feelings because I knew she wasn't judging me. But I was judging myself. So she was kind of like my level ground where I was like, if I was saying something bad about me, she would be like, you got to stop with this. Like, look at this way, because she was coming from a different perspective than mine. So I needed to be alone with myself because I know I needed to learn how to be alone because I wasn't good at being alone. And like you said, your therapist, she's like, oh, you don't like your company?
Yeah.
I was like, growing up, I didn't want to be alone. Like if we're here sitting, the two of us in the silence, in my mind, something was wrong.
Right.
So we had to be talking, it had to be noisy, it had to be things happening. So I needed to figure out how to be alone because now I'm alone. I got to figure out how to be good and be happy with this. And I needed to get rid of my shame. I needed to get rid of the feeling that was my fault and maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I wasn't worthy. Maybe I was damaged goods now. So I had to get rid of those feelings in order to be able to move on.
So one of the reasons, everything you're saying about, you felt so unworthy, you felt unlovable, how could anybody ever choose me or love me again? That's one of the very reasons, that's absolutely the reason we chose to talk about shame today. You can tell I'm already avoiding my shame.
I know.
I'm asking you all the questions.
Just make it all about me, sure.
It's all about you today, Nat. No, but that's the destruction. I think we have to be clear. That's where shame is so destructive, because when you stay in a place of shame and you're not finding your way out, you're just completely enmeshed in feelings of unworthiness. Yeah. And so I think that's one of the things we want to sort of uncover and dig around a little bit. As I was listening to you, a couple of things came forward for me. One, I had so much immense shame over the closure of that little business, and it triggered all the shame, all the, I guess, feelings of unworthiness or feelings like maybe I can't do it as a woman in business. Interestingly, I had come into that second business having a really successful first business and going, oh yeah, I got this. I got the keys to success. There's no way I won't be successful at this. I came into it with just a whole lot of confidence. And then for that to be the business that failed, it smacked hard. It cut deep. It cut my confidence out from under me. I couldn't believe that I lost that business. And that's a small loss compared to the loss of a husband, but I was already carrying this
burden.
Yeah, and this sense of, and I think shame does this, it did it to me anyway. Living so big in the world, having such confidence, being, a person who really, at the time, really believed in myself, I went smaller. I became smaller. And then when James died, I became teeny tiny. I mean, there just was not, I didn't have any feelings of worthiness to go out into the world and be strong.
Although you were pretending that you were still
But
fine.
I was totally
but
pretending.
Inside you feel tiny. It's like
What's the story you told me about the show I've never seen?
Oh,
Twilight.
Yes. So, all right. So there's this. It's like a movie. It was like a book. They turned into a movie. Twilight, right? So that's like on the last movie, I think. There's a scene that the main character.
What's her name?
Her name is Bella.
Bella. Love Bella.
She's turning into a vampire. No, it sounds stupid, but it's gonna make sense. So she's turning into a vampire. They think she's dead because she's got some superpowers. So it's like she's just peaceful. Like it looks like she's dead. So they're like crying over her, feeling like freaking out. And so they show the opposite side, which is a scene of her like inside. She's like in pain and she's like struggling. So they show the two different sides. And like on the outside, I can look at you and you can be going through hell and I can think of you like you're pretty, you got it all together, you look good. On the outside, you got the house, you got the car, you got the family, you got this, you got that. And I don't know what's inside you, like that opposite. And it was like, I remember using that analogy, like when I saw that movie, I remember thinking that's how I felt.
I totally get it. And I think too, yes, that's, not only was that me, it still is me many days.
Yeah.
But I think that's how we all feel in the world. We're all carrying some enormous hurt, pain, sorrow, betrayal, destruction, financial loss. And we walk around because our culture teaches us, keep moving, you got to rally, you got to be okay, keep
hustle,
working, don't feel it, just keep going. And yet on the inside, we're ravaged. I think that's part of why we don't know how to really walk out of shame.
But and I remember when I watched that, it was like in my mind, I was like, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Because on the outside, I was trying to like keep it together. If people talk to me, I'm trying to be positive about. Sure. I'm trying to say this. I'm moving on. I'm like, people are seeing just like this person that's like, oh yeah, I can't believe you're gonna go travel by yourself. You're moving to a city you don't know anybody, and people think it's like so far off. But like inside, the reason I was doing it is because I was like in so much pain.
Absolutely.
I didn't have a place where like it was home, or like support. I have very little support, and like I had a very good friend of mine that was very supportive, but like she had her own family, like, and I'm like, I understood that it's not like I'm over, like I'm 30 something, like I can't expect you to pick up my pieces. Like I have to figure out how to do it. I am a little bit overly independent at this point, as you can tell, but
yep.
But
love that about you.
So, but like I had this idea, but like I was in pain and I carried so much shame, and it took me a very long time. It was for me to really be able to talk to people again. I only did that when I came back to Florida, when I moved back from being overseas, and I started working at this job, and it really put me in a place where I had to show up in a way and talk to people. And it really taught me something really important, where I'm working with people every day, and yes, I might be training them, but people, there's a reason what drives them to want to change and want to train, right? So like now like I'm able to share with different people and connect with different people that I will have the privilege to work with. And I have people that I only consult with, and I don't necessarily work with them on a one-on-one basis, but like it showed me so much that there's so much pain with other people. And when my thoughts of shame come back, I have to remind myself of like the conversations I have with other people. It's like that also applies to me. I also have the ability to give myself some grace and let go what happened. Like I also deserve that grace. I also deserve to be happy again. I don't have to keep being stuck on those thoughts of like that happened.
That's beautiful. But tell me how you got from being in shame to be able to be graceful with yourself, to give yourself the grace to say, okay, I can be happy again.
In my case in particular, when I went away, so I was not Christian before, and I became a Christian early on and into my like traveling, and I would spend my whole day, because I had so many questions and I had so many fears. I would spend the whole day walking around the city, whatever I would walk like sometimes like 40,000 steps,
Wow.
like through Rome. I'm like, I was walking those streets. Like I could walk anywhere, and I was listening to services. Sometimes I would listen to like 7 in one day. And like I would walk and I would listen to that. And I was like really like paying attention to what it was being said and trying to make sense of it, of okay, like why do I, like I'm a good person, I'm not hurting anybody, I'm not doing this, why do I still have to go through this? Like, because I think that's like a normal question we ask ourselves when we're in a bad spot. It's like, why me?
Absolutely.
Well, because it's not all about you, okay? Okay, fine. So like in my mind, later on I understood this, like, okay, God promised He would support, provide for you and protect you, but it didn't promise you it was going to be easy. So like I do sometimes battle with myself in those, but I have to remind myself when I look back, He always provided, He always protected, and I've never in any moment didn't have what to eat, where to live, or anything. I've lived in some interesting places, but
You say that couched.
yeah. But I spent some time living in my friend's laundry room at one point by choice, but it was interesting, but I was happy because I had been able to figure out that the shame, it was part of me now, like in a way, but I learned how to live with it. And like, it didn't bother me as much. And the more I did to focus on other areas, the less shame I felt about it, because then now I can see, yes, I have skills. I do have other people that love me. I am good, and I have all these things. So like when I can look at myself and be like, yeah, I am A, B, C, and D, shame doesn't sound so loud anymore. And you can come and try to remind me, but now I have all these other things to remind me how good I am, and all the things that I have and all the people that I have. You can just go away now. So that's how it feels. And it's like, it's a constant. I don't think it will ever go away. I think there's always going to be something that's going to remind you.
I mean, like I said, I don't think there's a person in the world who can say they absolutely have no shame, but you work to get over the big ones, and then the little ones come along. I think it was Dr. Kurt Thompson. He's a wonderful psychiatrist, writer, and he just wrote this new book. I've only read bits of it, but I was profoundly impacted. It's called The Deepest Place, and he speaks to shame. And it's so curious to me too, because you always expect doctor, psychiatrist, do you have it all worked out? Because you're telling us how to work it out, And he walked into the studio. I heard one podcast, and he said, "Of course I have shame. I had shame just a minute ago when I walked in here. I didn't feel good enough to come do this podcast." But he said, as human beings, we are designed to create and to have joy, but shame violates that. Shame poaches it. And I think it's so important to try to look at one's shame and find something. Again, I say find that rope to hold on to that helps guide you out. But you keep taking us back to, and my life follows the same path of, it's the people along the way who draw you out just a little bit at a time, and they have belief and they have compassion, and then it begins to bleed into you that, oh, I don't have to be so ashamed of this. I'm not unworthy because of this. And that leads us to beginning to have courage. Courage, I believe, you have courage. I think true courage is that you act in spite of fear, because shame and fear are those two cups that walk hand in hand.
Yep.
But courage, I think, is what begins to guide you out of shame.
Yep. And it's hard, like, when you have shame, it's going to bring a lot of fears. And your only way of fighting out is having the courage to get out of bed. It's having the courage to say hi to the person, even though you're cringing inside. Mm-hmm. It's having courage for the most, like, silly little things.
As you said, to take care of yourself, to shower,
yep.
to eat, to do basic life functions are the very first walks out.
And it's hard when you're in a moment because you don't have the desire.
No, you don't have the desire, not at first. Thank you so much for joining us today and for listening. We'll see you next week.